What is going on, folks? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my deep and very insightful thoughts into Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I just got home from watching it. No spoilers just yet. I'll give you some spoilers in a bit, but my freaking God, that movie was incredible. It was just such an experience. I'm still reeling from it. I feel like I'm still in the movie. It was such a roller coaster of emotions for sure. I was deeply emotionally affected by the film throughout the entire experience. But the visuals, man, wow. Like, I mean, they definitely outdid themselves with respect to the Into the Spider-Verse movie. Like, they upped the ante here. I mean, this is a movie that won the Oscar for Best Animated Film, and they had a lot to live up to, and they just leaned into it, and they did not hold back, and they were not afraid, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what the first movie meant. They knew what they could do as a result of that being sort of a launch pad for what could come next. And they hit it out of the park. Like, they basically did exactly what you would expect them to do. And wow, I mean, it just absolutely mind-blowing. Like, just wow. Gorgeous from beginning to end. A visual spectacle. Like, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I was captivated the entire time. And of course, Spider-Man. Just Spider-Man. But acting, the performances, the story. There was so much there. Like, there was so much going on, and it was so artistic and beautiful, but it was grounded, you know, like, it was still about people. It was still about relationships. It was still about, you know, things that everybody can identify with. So, you know, beyond it sort of taking us to this next level of visual storytelling, like, it also brought us in terms of just like letting us connect to what is familiar, what is something that all of us can relate to, you know, family, relationships, growing up, all this stuff, like the people we care about, having to sacrifice things, having potentially to sacrifice others. Like, it's all very very much a wonderful experience. And I'm just so happy that I got to experience it. I'm so happy that I got to experience it again, because I'm definitely going to watch this again. And I can't wait till the third one. You know, this is part 1 of 2. This is definitely a long experience. It doesn't feel, even though you get that sort of like that cliffhanger type of experience from it at the end, it does feel like a complete one. I mean, obviously you want more. More will come, but it doesn't feel like it's half of a movie. It feels like a complete experience. So that's excellent, and I'm really happy about that. And don't mind my little scar here. This is where the aliens lobotomized me last night while I slept, and inserted a chip into my head that they're going to use to control me. And we'll talk about that later when I'm like being, you know, puppeteer to rule the planet. But all that aside, folks. By the way, AI revolution right now. Whoa, run. We'll talk about that another time. All right, so I'm going to get into some spoilers here. So if you have not seen the movie, I do recommend you turn this off, because I don't want to ruin it for you. I think it's important that you get to experience this movie the way it was intended to be experienced, and to really kind of enjoy it for what it is. So you have been warned. I'm about to spoil this movie. Wild stuff. Definitely very multiversal, right? I love how they connected it to like every other Spider thing. Like, they even had what's his name? Glover. The guy that played Lando, the comedian, the singer, Glover, Donald Glover. I believe that's his name, Donald Glover. As the Prowler, trapped in the movie in live action. You had the woman from the Venom movies in the liquor store, like in live action. I believe we saw some Andrew Garfield live action. I'm pretty sure we saw that. It was sort of, I mean, obviously there was some overlays and some artistic manipulation of the background, but I'm pretty sure. So like it was not afraid to lean into like the multiversal thing. And I did like that they mentioned the Doctor Strange thing, and they didn't say that that was Earth 616. Like that was straight up the MCU Earth that in the comics has already been established to be like Earth 1999. I forget the number exactly, but it's not Earth 616. Like some executive at Marvel came forward and said that the MCU was Earth 616, which is ridiculous because that's the reality of the comic books. That is Earth 616. So this movie like was pure to that, right? And it was really ultimately about maintaining canon, which I really like. At the heart of it, there's like this idea of like, we got to maintain canon. Like there's certain canonical things that have to happen. If they don't happen, then, you know, shit can go awry. And like, that was like the whole basis of like the central conflict. But like, it took a lot to build up to that. It took a lot of storytelling. You had to tell all of Gwen's backstory, which I loved. And every universe had its own distinctive art style, which is so incredible. It's so mind-blowing to like just know that there's just these beautifully just talented and powerful artistic minds behind all this, like creating like this very distinctive sort of aspects to each universe and holding true to it and allowing every frame to be sort of this beautiful work of art that both evokes the distinctiveness of the worlds that we see, but also is an expressionistic sort of representation of things that are going on inside of the characters. Expressionism, we've seen it in paintings, we've seen it in film. A lot of sort of the earlier sort of versions of artistic filmmaking, going back to George Méliès's Journey to the Moon, back like where spectacle and like this and a lot of sort of big ideas were being explored visually started. Like there were threads from all of that into this movie where it's like it took cues from everything that ever came before, and it just kind of brought them all together in this beautiful kind of symphonic visual feast of just everything. But it also works so well. This movie is a work of art. I would be surprised if the movie didn't also win the Oscar for Best Animated Film, but it may actually win the Oscar for Best Film. I went with a buddy. He said like that was the greatest like movie going experience he's ever had in his life. I mean, that's saying a lot, you know. I mean, I have to agree, it's a very unique and powerful experience. For me, I studied film. You know, I went to film school at USC. What's up, Trojans? And so like I've explored so many different sort of the precursors to like film as art, as we see it, you know, executed today. But so for me, like I've seen a lot of really interesting ways that film can sort of explore the language of visual storytelling. And so I see the pieces at play here, but I also do understand like how altogether this can be considered just such a powerful experience that one would be led to say like this is probably the best movie-going experience they've ever had. I've heard critics say the same thing, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to say that as well. So that's a very powerful notion, and it's a testament to the film, a testament to the filmmaking, a testament to every aspect of what is on the digital celluloid that this movie ultimately is presented in. Just such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. So yeah, so we get that beginning, like Gwen, like we really focus on Gwen, on Spider-Woman, Ghost Spider, Spider-Gwen, whatever you want to call her. This version of Gwen Stacy who becomes, a spider character. Her backstory, how she's taken into this sort of multiversal police type of organization, and really like cementing her place as like this like important, well-rounded character in this patchwork that is the movie. Ultimately, the movie is about Miles, but it's also about her. And it's also about all these other Spider characters too, which is so wonderful. They did so much, and I don't know, there's just so much to like just reflect on and enjoy. But beautiful, like, opening sort of establishment of her backstory, the stylistic representations of her world, also an expressionistic representation of what she was going through and ultimately had to face, leaving her father behind, having her father turn his gun on her, like about to arrest her. Like, that's some powerful shit within like the first fucking 5-10 minutes of the movie before we even see like the opening credits. Just wonderful, wonderful stuff. And then of course, like, grounded, right? Miles, his parents, you know, like the whole, like, you know, it's just like the classic, you know, Spider-Man like story of like Spidey's trying to do good for the world and the city and etc. But he's also trying to like just, you know, uphold this illusion of who he is in his secret identity, and, you know, ultimately failing a lot and letting a lot of people down in ways that they don't understand is necessary for the greater good. Which is also at the heart of this movie, which is at the heart of the story of a spider person, right? This sort of idea that, like, you know, the good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one. Like, you know, just with great power comes great responsibility. Like, sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice things that you love for the greater good, you know? Like, it's just such a powerful idea, and it's always been explored so beautifully in the Peter Parker story, but now also in the Miles Morales story, also in the Gwen Stacy Spider-Gwen story, etc., etc., etc. Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, we got a lot of his story as well. You know, we got the Peter from that alternate reality who is now back with Mary Jane and has a kid, and it's just, there's just wonderful, 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 wonderful explorations of the sort of themes that underpin the story of these heroes, right? Such a wonderful, wonderful tapestry. So we get really grounded. We get these really wonderful moments with Spider-Man. We get the introduction of the Spot, which ultimately turns out to be the big threat, but we don't know that, right? He just seems like a joke. He's presented as a joke. He was presented as a joke in the trailer, right? And he's always kind of been a joke as a Spider villain, but this movie really took him to the next level, which is really interesting. So obviously we all know where that goes, but like, I love what they did with this character, because he's such a nothing character ultimately, or had been, but now he's going to become a huge Spider villain, which is awesome, you know, that you can just take like this sort of obscure character and make something really substantial out of them. I really like how that went, that sort of played out, and I love the representation of the Spot, like the look of the spots, like the sort of bleeding black spots and splotchiness of it all, to ultimately represent sort of his warped, you know, sense of being, of existing, of motivation, that is going to be at the heart of the conflict at the end of this movie, but also like into the next one, right? Where like we're going to see a lot of this play out in really harrowing ways, I think. I can't wait for the next one. It's going to be really, really cool. But yeah, so like that ultimately led us to Gwen coming back, and then the introduction of the multiversal force, and like we went to Manhattan, like sort of this Indian version of Manhattan, where you have the Indian Spider-Man and his story, and then that establishes the breaking of the canon. And by the way, that whole sequence, beautiful, gorgeous, the style, just chef's kiss. Loved it so much. Loved every aspect of that particular world. And then we finally go into Miguel O'Hara's world. We establish his backstory and how he understands how you can break a reality by making decisions that are self-centered, and what drives him to stop Miles from trying to do the same. We see the whole world of the Spider folks. We see Ben Reilly, which is Peter Parker's clone from Earth 616, who is bitter. I love the representation of his character. He's all like brooding and tragic. It's like, I immediately started cracking up when I saw him, and he was all like just falling apart every second, so like melodramatically. I was like, yes, this is awesome. I hate Ben Reilly, and this is exactly how I want to see him. I hate Ben Reilly. There's a whole thing. There was a whole storyline in the 90s where he was the clone, but he came forward as not the clone, and like the Peter Parker we've known for 30 years was established to be a clone, and it was effed up. It was just not a good look for the Spider-Man world. So we've moved on from that, fortunately. And Ben Reilly has forever been sort of the bane of the Spider-Man fans. And I like the way this sort of kind of played into that in a sense, and like kind of really took it to the natural extent that it needed to be, where, he's just kind of this like broody joke, because that's what he is. He's a broody joke. Sorry, Ben Reilly. Not sorry. Yeah, so we get that. We get everything that went on in that world, and then ultimately Miles, and the sequences in there. I mean, the chase of Miles, like the representation of that world, this sort of futuristic world. Oh, because it's the future. It's Spider-Man 2099. Okay, I'm getting that now. And then, ultimately the realization, oh, Miles, your dad is going to have to die. And you have to let him, and we're not going to let you leave to stop him. And it's like, it's powerful. It's expected, but it's powerful nonetheless. And just like the mix of the emotion that goes along with that story and that decision and everything that goes along with that, interwoven with the beautiful tapestry made of webs of what we're seeing, because it's just so beautiful. Every frame is a work of art, right? It's such a beautiful sort of full realization of the potential of what film can be. Just absolutely wonderful, absolutely gorgeous. Cannot say enough good things about it. So fantastic. Loved every second of it. And then, finally Gwen gets to go home. She resolves the stuff with her father. And then Miles thinks he's home, but he's not home. And he's like in this like alternate dimension. And then, we have established that he himself is an anomaly, that he wasn't supposed to be, and that spider that bit him was from a different dimension. And that was a result of the experiments that were being conducted in that lab that ultimately, led to everything that happened in the first film. And how, that spider came from an Earth where Spider-Man never became Spider-Man, and Miles ultimately is revealed to have become the Prowler, and we see his uncle and his dad's dead. It's just wonderful. And then all of a sudden it ends. I mean, it feels so short when I'm talking about it, but the experience was just so full and so rich and so alive, like I feel like the life of this movie, like flowing through me. I'm just being driven to talk about it. It's just such a wonderful thing. I don't know. It's just like the whole idea of the Spider-Verse has always been a controversial one within like just traditional Spider-Man fans, because it's like, it's like you have your Peter Parker, and like that was the heart of the Spider-Man story, and then the Ultimate Universe was introduced in the 2000s by Marvel, and it was sort of a way to explore the same characters, but in a more kind of realistic way, like ultimately to sort of establish like sort of a kind of a foundation for what a cinematic universe could build from. And within that world, Michael Bendis like decided, I'm going to kill Spider-Man. I'm going to make a new Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and he introduced Miles, and then Miles sort of started gaining traction, and then we had two Spider characters. But And then what happened was Dan Slott, this other creator who told this really amazing story in the early aughts called Superior Spider-Man, in which Doc Ock basically kills Spider-Man, takes over his body, and becomes Spider-Man. And so for like a year or more, it was Doc Ock in Spider-Man. He was trying to be the hero, and he was like elevating what Peter could do by amassing like financial resources and building an empire behind Spider-Man. And it's like there were so many twists and turns because it was taking us in this different direction that we'd never seen. Anyway, eventually that got resolved. Dan Slott then created the Spider-Verse, and that's when we started seeing sort of this multiverse of Spider characters. And a lot of old school Spider-Man fans are like, wait a minute, hold on, like how can no, there should only be like one Spider character, Peter. And then people were okay with Miles, but like then Spider-Gwen shows up, and then etc etc. So to have so many Spider characters now, there is some pushback by the older fans, but like it nonetheless is sort of the natural next step to the storytelling. Once you establish that there's a multiverse, and like you just basically have to, it's a really great engine for telling stories, because if you keep telling the same stories in the same universe, I think history has shown us that just gets stale because it gets redundant. You keep telling the same stories over and over again. And this allows you to tell different versions of a familiar story in a completely different way, which keeps it interesting, right? It allows you to explore different themes, different lives, different ways to kind of, have the audience identify with this story, and I'm all for it, because Peter Parker will always be there. There will always be a Peter Parker. He will always be the first Spider-Man. So I don't know. I think it all works. For me, it works. And it worked in this movie, and I'm super excited by just the fact that it exists. I was able to experience it. All of us get to experience it, and we're going to experience more of this. And like the artists behind it got to like see their vision come to life in such a wonderful way, and that it's going to keep happening, and that this is going to set a precedent for what could be done, with animation, with film. We saw a trailer for the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, and like the animation is also like kind of, experimental. It's kind of trying to represent like what you would see on a comic book page, visually. This movie started something, and obviously it itself is borrowing from things, because if you look at a lot of like animation beyond like what the studios have done and what you see on television, the sort of things that you might see in like short films that are nominated for Oscars and films that are taken to film festivals, things of that sort. Animation has always been a medium for a lot of interesting exploration, but here it's kind of brought together in the most wonderful way. The budget is where it needs to be for it to be precise. The digital technology allows it to go even further than it's ever gone before. And so this is really sort of the next step, and this is then going to be the foundation for whatever's going to come next. Like, you have to imagine that AI will then take, what these artists create, and maybe even take that to the next level in a way we can't even imagine, So there's all sorts of things coming. By the way, with the whole AI thing, I don't like it, but it's coming, so I accept it. I don't like that it has to build off of things that came before, and that it's basically stealing. This is a whole other topic. Maybe one day I'll make a video about it, but probably not, because this is not the place for it. But nonetheless, like, AI exists, and it will play a role in the creation of art moving forward. So it's always going to come into the conversation no matter what. Anyway, this movie, fantastic, beautiful, wonderful, spectacular. I loved it. I'm going to see it again at some point soon. We have The Flash coming up, which I'm very excited about. I believe I might be going to watch it next week if the stars align. I might be able to do that. And yeah, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy was fantastic. I've watched it 3 times already. I look forward to Secret Wars. I'm looking forward to the Marvels. there's just, I don't know. It's just, everything's really cool right now. And yeah, just really happy with all of it. Really happy with this movie. Really happy with, and in the end, it's Spider-Man. Like, I love Spider-Man. I've always loved Spider-Man. Like, this is Amazing Spider-Man number 300, my favorite Spider-Man comic. You know, this is like McFarlane, like, basically creating Venom. Like, I've always loved Spidey. I read Spidey and X-Men. Those are my books growing up. And even though I don't read Spidey as much these days, I just kind of listen to the stories that are being told, you know, through the grapevine. And occasionally I'll pick up a Spidey book. I'll always love Spidey. And the movies have been some of my favorites. And Spider-Man Far From Home was, Spider-Man No Way Home was probably one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. This was one of the best things I've ever seen in my life, and they're both Spider things. And anyway, I'm really excited about these movies and what this could lead to, and the fact that this exists. And like, I can't wait to see how this kind of reverberates throughout our culture, because the first movie was experimental. People just saw it as a Spider-Man film. That was animated. Not a lot of people went. It did okay, but it didn't do a lot. Then it won the Oscar. It got all the acclaim. Normal people got into it. I think this movie is building off of something that is unprecedented. And so it will then set in a new sort of unprecedented story of its own, in just its existence and sort of how it plays out, both as a financial product and also as a culturally impacting piece of art, which is going to be very interesting to kind of see the effects of. Anyway, that's my shtick. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much for checking out my video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Click the like button or dislike button. Who knows? Leave a little comment if you want. Say hello, whatevs. And as always, first of all, I want to make sure everybody's okay. I hope everybody's doing well and life's treating you the best it possibly can, and that you're hanging in there. Things are wild and crazy, and that's just life. And as always, I want to remind all of you that if you have not already, you better put an X in the box, because ain't nobody checking me. Ain't nobody checking me, folks. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.